here. I'm here. Facebook was just giving me a hard time. My son was just giving me a hard time as well. But I'm here. I'm ready for a timeout. It's Friday afternoon. How's everybody doing out there this Friday? Everybody good? I'm going to do our check-in list today because we haven't done that in a while, and it's really one of our roots here at Frankenstein Tea. Here is your mental health check-in for Friday, June 12th. Have you had a regular meal? Have you showered? Have you had enough sleep? Are you thinking kind thoughts about yourself and others? Have you had fresh air? Have you connected with someone you love? Have you moved your body? And those are all do's. And here is the do not, the don't compare yourself to others. It's our little mental health check-in cheat sheet here. We've been working from this all through shelter in place and through the first stage of reopening here. I think it's still appropriate because I think COVID is still stressful. Maybe other things are stressful as well. Perhaps reopening is stressful. Whatever you're dealing with, I hope you're having an okay day. And of course, as always, if not, no shame in getting the help that you need. So please do. Please find resources that can help you. Hi, Dad. I see you. I'm going to try to have a sip of this. I just made it. Let's see if I can. Yeah, it's good. I'm alone in the building today. I've been alone most of the time in the building, but I do have a few coworkers that come in and out a little. More so now this last week. Another one is starting to show up a little, although now she's on vacation. But today I'm alone. And I've gotten a lot done. So it's been a good day for me, aside from Facebook giving me a hard time and my son giving me a hard time. But I'll live through that. Okay, so today's story is by William Trevor from a book called Cheating at Canasta. He's a pretty well-known writer, short story writer. He's got a bunch of short stories. And I remembered reading this entire book years ago and like loving it and like really loving one of the stories. And I've been trying to find it, I don't know, a couple months now since I started Frankenstein Tea. I had this book in mind and I've been looking for it and can't find it and don't even know if it's this book anymore. I cannot figure out what's going on with me and William Trevor and Cheating at Canasta. But I went back to it today, and I am going to read you something from this book. So this is William Trevor. Cheating at Canasta is the name of the story collection. It was published by Viking, 2004. And I'm reading Cheating at Canasta, the title story. William Trevor, Cheating at Canasta, published by Viking, 2004. My friend Lars is on there. I kind of thought about you with this one, Lars. Not sure why. Might just be that kind of story that you like. Not sure. Here we go. Cheating at Canasta by William Trevor. It was a Sunday evening, but Sunday, Mallory remembered, had always been as any other day at Harry's bar. In the upstairs restaurant, the waiters hurried with their loaded plates, calling out to one another above the noisy chatter. Turbo, scalapa a la Milanese, grilled chops, scrambled eggs with bacon or smoked salmon, peas, or spinaci al burro, mashed done in a particularly delicious way. All were specialties here, where the waiters' most remarkable skill was their changing of the tablecloths with a sleight of hand that was admired 100 times a night and even occasionally applauded. Downstairs, Americans and Italians stood 3 or 4 deep at the bar, and no one heard much of what anyone else said. Bulky without being corpulent, sunburnt, blue eyed, with the look of a weary traveler, Mallory was an Englishman in the middle years of his life and was, tonight, alone. 4 of those years had passed since he had last sat down to dinner with his wife in Harry's bar. "You promise me you'll go back for both of us," Julia had pleaded when she knew she would not be returning to Venice herself, and he had promised. But more time than he'd intended had slipped by before he had done so. What was it called? Julia had tried to remember, and he said, Harry's bar. The kheer he'd asked for came. He ordered turbot and Caesar salad first. He pointed at agave that had not been on the wine list before. Perfecto, the waiter approved. There was a pretense that Julia could still play cards, and in a way, she could. On his visits, they would sit together on the sofa in the drawing room of her confinement and challenge one another in another game of canasta, which so often they played on their travels or in the garden of the house they'd lived in since their marriage, where their children had been born. No matter what, Julia had said, aware then of what was coming, let's always play cards. And they did. For even with her memory gone, a little more of it each day, her children taken, her house, her flower beds, belongings, clothes. Their games in the communal drawing room were a reality her affliction still allowed. Not that there was order in their games, not that they were games at all, but still her face lit up when she found a joker or a 2 among her cards, was pleased that she could do what her visitor was doing, even though she couldn't quite, even though once in a while she didn't know who he was. He picked up from the floor the kings and jacks, the 8s and 10s, her fumbling fingers dropped. He put them to one side. It didn't matter where. He cheated at canasta, and she won. The promise Julia had exacted from her husband, had been her last insistence. Perturbation had already begun, and a fringe of the grayness that was to claim her so early in her life. Because tonight he was alone where so often she had been with him, Mallory recalled with piercing rawness that request and his assent to it. He had not hesitated, but had agreed immediately, wishing she had asked for something else. Would it have mattered much, he wondered in the crowded restaurant, if he had not at last made this journey, the first of the many she had wanted him to make? In the depths of her darkening twilight, if there still were places they belonged in a childhood he had not known, among shadows that were hers, not his, not theirs. And all that was forgotten, how could it matter if a whim, forgotten too, was put aside, as the playing cards that fell from her hand were? A table for 6 was lively in a corner, glasses raised, a birthday celebration it appeared to be. A couple who hadn't booked or had come too early were sent away. A tall, thin woman looked about her, searching for someone who wasn't there. The last time, Mallory remembered, their table had been by the door. He went through the contents of his wallet, the familiar cards, the list of the telephone numbers he always brought abroad, some unused tickets for the Paris metro, scraps of paper with nothing on them, colored slips unnecessarily retained. its carte bancaire stapled to it. The bill of his hotel in Paris was folded twice and was as bulky as his tidy wad of euro currency notes. Lisa, someone had scribbled on the back of a 50. His wine came. He had traveled today from Monterosso, from the coast towns of the Cinque Terre, where often in September they had walked the mountain paths. The journey in the heat had been uncomfortable. He should have broken it, she would have said, a night in Milan or Brescia, to look again at the fopas in the convent. Of course, he should have arranged that, Mallory reflected, and felt foolish that he hadn't, and then foolish for being where he was, among people who were here for pleasure or reasons more sensible than his. It was immediately a relief when a distraction came, his melancholy interrupted by a man's voice. "Why are you crying?" an American somewhere asked. This almost certainly came from the table closest to his own, but all Mallory could see when he slightly turned his head was a salt cellar on the corner of a tablecloth. There was no response to the question that had been asked, or none that he heard, and the silence that gathered went on. He leaned back in his chair as if wishing to glance more easily at a framed black and white photograph on the wall, a street scene dominated by a towering flat iron block. From what this movement allowed, he established that the girl, who had been asked why she was crying, wasn't crying now. Nor was there a handkerchief clenched in the slender, fragile-seeming fingers on the tablecloth. A fork in her other hand played with the peas on her plate, pushing them about. She wasn't eating. A dressed-up child, too young even to be at the beginning of a marriage, but instinctively Mallory knew that she was already the wife of the man who sat across the table from her. A white band drew hair as smooth as ebony back from her forehead. Her dress, black too, was severe in the same way, unpatterned, its only decoration the loop of a necklace that matched the single pearl of each small earring. Her beauty startled Mallory, the delicacy of her features, her deep, unsmiling eyes. And he could tell that there was more of it, lost now in the empty gravity of her discontent. "A better fellow than I am." Her husband was ruddy, her hair tidily brushed and parted, the knot of a red silk tie neither too small nor clumsily large in its crisp white collar, his linen suit uncreased. Laughing slightly when there was no response, either to his statement about someone else being a better fellow, he added, "I mean, the sort who gets up early." Mallory wondered if they were what he'd heard called Scott Fitzgerald people, and for a moment imagined he had wondered it aloud, as if, after all, Julia had again come to Venice with him. It was their stylishness, their deportment, the young wife's beauty, her silence going on that suggested Scott Fitzgerald, a surface held in spite of an unhappiness. "Oh, but," Julia said, "he's careless of her feelings." "Prego, signor." The arrival of Mallory's Caesar salad shattered this interference with the truth, more properly claiming his attention and causing him to abandon his pretense of an interest in something that wasn't there. It was a younger waiter who brought the salad, who might even be the boy, grown up a bit, whom Julia had called the primo piatto boy and had tried her Italian on. While Mallory heard himself wished buon appetito, while the oil and vinegar were placed more conveniently on the table, he considered that yes, there was a likeness, certainly of manner. It hadn't been understood by the boy at first when Julia asked him in Italian how long he'd been a waiter, but then he'd said he had begun at Harry's bar only a few days ago and had been nowhere before. Subito, signor. He promised now when Mallory asked for pepper, and more wine before he went away. I didn't know Geoffrey got up early. At the table that was out of sight, her voice was soft, the quietness of its tone registering more clearly than what it conveyed. Her husband said he hadn't caught this. I didn't know he got up early, she repeated. It's not important that he does. It doesn't matter what time the man gets up. I only said it to explain that he and I aren't in any way alike. I know you're not like Geoffrey. Why are you crying? Again, there was no answer, no indistinct murmur, no lilt in which words were lost. You're tired. Not really. I keep not hearing what you're saying. I said I wasn't tired. Mallory didn't believe she hadn't been heard. Her husband was closer to her than he was, and he'd heard the not really himself. The scratchy irritation nurtured malevolence unpredictably in both of them, making her not say why she had cried and causing him to lie. My God, Mallory thought, what they are wasting. No one's blaming you for being tired. No one can help being tired. She didn't take that up, and there was silence while, again, the surface held and Mallory finished his Caesar salad. He was the only diner on his own in the upstairs restaurant, where for a moment on his arrival he had been faintly disappointed not to be recognized. He had recognized himself, the features of the waiter who had led him to his table. There had later been that familiarity about the younger one, nor could he help remembering from 4 years ago the easy warmth of the welcome that had suggested stirrings of recognition then. But he hadn't been a man on his own 4 years ago, and naturally it was difficult for restaurant waiters when they were presented with only part of what there'd been before. And perhaps he was a little more crumpled than before, and 4 years was a longer lapse of time than there ever was in the past. My sister married Geoffrey, the girl at the table behind was saying. Yes, she did. And all I'm trying to say, I know what you're saying. It's just I wonder if you do. You're saying I thought it would be like Geoffrey and Ellen, that I was looking forward to what isn't there. It's hard to understand why anyone married Geoffrey. Tonight, it didn't matter what they said. Dreary Geoffrey, who rose early to read his emails or scrutinize his bank statements, who liked to lead an ordered life, was enough tonight to nourish their need to punish one another. That her sister's marriage wasn't much was something to throw into their exchanges, to comment on tonight because it hadn't, perhaps, been touched upon before. Now, we don't know one single bit of that, Julia, in her occasionally stern way, might have said, and seemed to say it now. Talk to me instead. He smiled, and across the restaurant, a woman in the jolly birthday party waved at him, as if she thought he'd smiled at her, or imagined she must know him and couldn't place him, or just felt sorry for him, alone like that in such convivial surroundings. He nodded, not letting his smile go, then looked away. For all her moments of sternness, how often on their travels had Julia speculated as widely as he ever had himself about people they didn't know. Lovers embracing in the Fauchon tea rooms, the Japanese at the Uffizi, Germans in the Lido sun, or cafe table chatterers anywhere. And they'd been listened to themselves. That stood to reason. He, taken for a country doctor, Julia had maintained, and she, an almoner or something like it. English, both of them, of course, for anyone could tell their voices confirmed as upper class when there'd been curiosity as to that. Va bene? The waiter, who'd been the primo patio boy, inquired, lifting away the Caesar salad plate. Was fine? Va bene, va bene. Grazie, signor. San Giovanni in Bragora was where the Cima Battisma they liked was, elusive on the train that morning, and ever since, the name of the church came back. Sometimes when you looked at it, that it seemed that Christ was still in the shallow water, but looking again, it wasn't so. The almost naked figure stood on dry land at the water's edge. The church of the Frari had Bellini's triptych. The saints he painted when he was over 80 were in San Giovanni Crisostomo. How could it make a difference not going again, alone, to admire them? Or standing or not standing before the Annunciation in San Giobbe, and whatever there was in Madonna del Orto. She'd be asleep now. As early as 5 o'clock, they were put to bed sometimes. I'm not, the girl was saying. If we're telling the truth, I'm not. No one can expect to be happy all the time. You asked me. I'm telling you because you asked me. Their waiter brought them raspberries with meringue and ice cream. Mallory watched the confections going by and heard the murmurs of the husband. Why have we ordered this? The girl complained when the waiter had gone. You wanted it. Why did you say I should have married Jeffrey? I didn't say. Well, whatever. Darling, you're tired. Why did we come here? Someone told us it was good. Why did we come to Venice? It was his turn not to reply. Marriage was an uncalculated risk, Mallory remembered saying once, the trickiest of all undertakings. He might have called it, might even have suggested that knowing this was an insurgence against the worst. Knowing this was insurance against the worst, a necessary awareness of what unwelcome surprises there might be. At least that's something, Julia had agreed, and said she hoped it was enough. Love's cruel angels at play, she called it when they upset one another. The quiet at the other table went on. Grazie mille, signor, Mallory heard when eventually it was broken, the bill paid then. He heard the chairs pulled back, and then the couple who had quarreled passed close to where he sat, and on an impulse he looked up and spoke to them. He wondered as he did so if he had already had too much to drink, for it wasn't like him to importune strangers. He raised a hand in a gesture of farewell, hoping they would go on. But they hesitated, and he sensed their realization that he, who was so clearly was not American, was English. There was a moment of disbelief, and then acceptance. This registered in their features, and shame crept in before the stylishness that had dissipated in the course of their quarrel returned to come to their rescue. His polite goodwill in wishing them good evening as they went by was politely acknowledged. Smiles and pleasantness, the harmless lies in their denial of all he'd heard. Its reputation's not exaggerated, the husband commented with easy charm. It's good, this place. Her chops had been delicious, she said. Falling in with this, Mallory asked them if it was their first time in Venice. Embarrassment was still there, but they somehow managed to make it seem like they were their reproval of themselves for inflicting their bickering on them. Oh, very much so, they said together, each seeming instinctively to know how their answer should be given. Not yours, I guess, the husband added, and Mallory shook his head. He'd been coming to Venice since first he'd been able to afford it, he said, and then he told them why he was here alone. While he did so, Mallory sensed in his voice an echo of his regret that foolishness had brought him here. He did not say it. He did not say that he was here to honor a whim that had been forgotten as soon as it was expressed. He did not deplore a tiresome, futile journey, but he'd come close to doing so and felt ashamed in turn. His manner had dismissed the scratchiness he'd eavesdropped on as the unseemly stuff of marriage. It was more difficult to dismiss his own sly aberration, and shame still nagged. I'm sorry about your wife. The girl's smile was gentle. I'm very sorry. Ah, well, belittling melancholy, he shook his head. Again the playing cards fall. Again he picks them up. She wins and then is happy, not knowing why. The party at the corner table came to an end, its chatter louder, then subdued. A handbag left behind was rescued by a waiter. Other people came. Tomorrow, what has been lost in recollection's collapse will be restored as she has known it. The pink and gold of the St. Giobbe's Annunciation, its dove, its virgin's features, its little trees, its God. Tomorrow, the silenced music will play in the piazza of San Marco, and tourists shuffle in the calles, and the boats go out to the islands. Tomorrow, the cats of Venice will be fed by ladies in the dried-out parks, and there'll be coffee on the Zatter. No, no, he murmured when the husband said he was sorry too. No, no. He watched the couple go and smiled across the crowded restaurant when they reached the door. Shame isn't bad, her voice from somewhere else insists, nor the humility that is its gift. That was Cheating at Canasta by William Trevor from a book of stories entitled Cheating at Canasta. It is a reminder for myself as to why I loved this book. As though I said in the beginning, it's not quite the story I'm still looking for. But I'll keep looking. Thanks for coming to Frankenstein Tea today. I hope the sun is shining where you are. It's shining here on Block Island. It's Friday afternoon in June, and it feels like that out there. So everybody keep wearing your masks, social distance, stay safe, stay well, be careful, eat your veggies, get some sleep, take a shower, get fresh air, think kind thoughts, don't compare yourself to others, move your body. I think that's the list. Thanks again for coming. I'll see you tomorrow, Saturday, here at 3 o'clock for another short story for adult listeners on Frankenstein Tea. Oh, Kay Hill, all right. You're welcome. I'm glad you liked it. That is like classic, right? That's like classic. There's something classic about that. I read Hemingway yesterday, and that brought me to William Trevor today. We'll see what comes up tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.